1. I recently moved back home to live with my mum, aunt, and younger sister. My mum owns the most placid and soft female Springer Spaniel I've ever met, and when I left my relationship, I brought home my cheeky male Jack Russell Cross. Both are a year old. They're called Belle and Oscar. It's usually just the four of us in the house plus dogs. However, on this occasion my grandparents were staying, as they live in Ireland and come over to visit. We live in a reasonably small town, and the area we live in, my grandparents both grew up in until they moved away around 6 years ago. So therefore they still know most people in the area plus their families. A month ago my granddad was outside working on his van, and a strange-looking man holding many different objects approached him, asking for a carrier bag. My granddad replied that he didn't have one on him, only a bin bag. The guy proceeded to tell him that he is currently staying in the psychiatric ward, not too far from us for his own safety, as many women are after him and want to sleep with him. My granddad continued to talk to him for a little while, and said he had to get back to work. He thought it was strange but never said anything, as he said nothing really shocks him anymore. So all this was forgotten until 3 weeks ago. I was in the garden with a friend having a few drinks, my grandparents both in the outhouse conversion we have, and the rest of the family in the living room. While I'm sat outside, I can hear Belle going crazy. She's usually the quietest and chilled dog, until she's playing tug with Oscar, or someone knocks on the door. Then she's on full alert to see who's visiting. The noise she was making was so loud I could hear snarls, growls, and the deepest bark I've ever heard her do. She sounded like a completely different dog. Oscar starts to chip in, yapping and going crazy. He's short, but a real tough, stocky little dog. So I sigh to myself and think they're fighting over a toy or a chew, and I go in to sort it out. As I shout their names, I hear the front door slam and a really loud knock. It's dark outside, so I don't go immediately to the door, as I had just heard it shut. My mum goes to the window, opens it, and sees a man there. He asks if we have any mixed-race children living in the house. My mum replies no, and he asks if she's sure. Again she tells him there isn't any living at the address. He stood for a minute, and then went and sat on the edge of our fence on the pavement side. He sat there for around 5 minutes. My sister goes to get my granddad as she's freaked out, and he said that it's the guy that approached him a week earlier. He stands up, stares at the house, and slowly walks away up the street, not knocking on any other doors, and goes off into the darkness. As we were in separate rooms, we tried to piece together everything. My sister asks me if I had been going out to my car as a door was being opened and shut repeatedly just before the knock. I reply no, I was in the garden and heard the dogs going crazy. Then we all start to realize it was the stranger who'd been trying to enter the house. He had obviously been opening the door and Belle had been going wild at him, not allowing him to enter. Hence the repeated slamming of the door. He must have heard me shouting the dogs and decided to knock instead, knowing the door was unlocked and that I would probably answer it. We all have no idea what his intentions were or whether he really was just confused and looking for someone. But I dread to think what would have happened if he had actually come in the house. I rang the psychiatric ward, and they had no record of him being there, anyone missing or being on release. He was distinctive looking, which made it easier for the hospital to check if anyone of that description had been admitted recently. We have lived in the house for over 10 years, and so have both our neighbors. My grandparents knew the family who lived here before us, so it's nearly impossible for him to have any sort of connection to our house. My mum isn't concerned about it anymore, but I've been unnerved for 3 weeks, and now have a bat hidden at the side of my bed. Plus I have all the doors open so the dogs can have full patrol of the house. I'm so thankful we have them both, and for Belle making herself look and sound 1000% tougher than I thought she was. So yeah, creepy door opener, let's not ever meet again. 2. It all started over a year ago, living in my current small neighborhood. It was unusually hot in our house for October, and my sister figured it'd be a good idea to keep her window open for a bit of air. She was doing her homework, and I was getting ready for bed when suddenly she burst into my room. She frantically says that she heard some noises outside, sounds of leaves crunching under a person's steps. I believed it to be an animal, so I walk into her room and stay there for not more than 5 minutes, until I hear leaves crunching. We quickly glance out the window, only to hear the sound of something running away in the woods. But that wouldn't be the end of the story. During the winter, I enjoy exploring the woods towards the back of my house, climbing trees and traveling further back into the fields. I remember the events very clearly. It had just snowed that night, first snowfall of winter, and I was more than excited to head out there. I did so and climbed my usual tree to look out. I gave a cursory glance around me, and at the ground when I noticed something strange. Footsteps, leading away from my house. This wouldn't be weird as long as the front of the footsteps didn't end pointing straight at my house, and the origin of them came from a seemingly long-off start. I tracked them down up to a point where there was a rusty wire fence covered in snow where they disappeared. October 2017, it started up again. I was laying in my bed, pitch dark, not a light shining through my room, when I heard it. My doorknob turning and my door creaking open. My heart stopped. Every single possibility of what it was rushing through my mind. Keep in mind my door is always shut when I go to sleep. Since I was covered by my blanket, I quickly shot my sister a text. "Did you just come in my room?" She replied with a sharp, "No, I'm all the way in Hillard." My heart began pumping fast. I slowly snuck my hand under my pillow and grabbed my baton. Sent a text to my dad and waited. My dad came in mere minutes later with a knife, shut on the lights, and I jumped out of bed. Searched the entire house with nothing. Alarm set and all doors locked. Impossible. There's no way that happened otherwise. My dad and mom were asleep, and a cat would have opened it much faster if it jumped at the doorknob. You best believe I didn't sleep a second that night. Fast forward to December. My relatives in town for a week in the basement. We turn on the alarm and all head to sleep. I stayed up gaming. In the morning around 2:30 to 3, estimated since I wasn't aware what had transpired, my uncle slowly opened his eyes with a feeling of being watched. His eyes adjusted a bit to the dark before he saw it. A guy, average height, scrawny, hair flowing in the wind, and shivering, looking inside their room through the window. My uncle screamed, and they grabbed the baby before taking off upstairs. That morning I was informed what happened. I looked for footprints and saw only the smallest sign of a footprint. A front toe print made by what I could only assume was a sneaker. My uncle gave me more details without me telling him I looked for footprints, and he said the guy was leaning to the left and looking in. The footprint matched his story. The left had a thin line of dirt anyone could have shimmied across. Now that leads to tonight. The night I could swear he or whatever it was had been in our house. I couldn't sleep. Life has been stressful lately and I was up pretty much all night until I tried getting rest. Every night I've had a string of Christmas lights dimly lit the room until tonight. I figured the lights must have been interfering with my sleep, so I unplugged them and headed off to sleep. Pillow over my head, I started to drift off until it happened. A quick strum of my guitar and the sound of something falling over, with a desperate attempt to stop it from hitting the ground, filled the room. The sound ignited my heart rate. Saliva developing at an extreme speed made it hard to not swallow. I could feel the presence of someone in my room. Realizing I left my baton on my desk, I did the next logical thing, pretend I was asleep. I tried and laid there for what felt like hours when in reality, it was only a few minutes, until I heard a whimper come from my sister's room. Imagining this may be the day everyone in my family was silently murdered but me. I gathered all the courage I had. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and grabbed my baton. I busted into my sister's room and screamed, "Hey!" only to see they were unharmed. My sister asked what the hell I was doing, and I just stood there, looked into the pitch black of the room, and cried. I have never in my life felt the overwhelming emotion of believing my family was going to be taken from me until today. I sit here in my chair writing this in the hopes to document my experiences and try to come to some logical conclusion. All I can come up with is that there is some guy stalking my family, and perhaps sneaking into our rooms at night. 3. Right after I graduated high school, I went to our community college, where my best friend at the time and her boyfriend also attended, along with a lot of their friends who I became acquainted with as well. Fast forward to Halloween of 2010. We took my best friend's little sister and brother out trick-or-treating, where her boyfriend ended up joining us. We were towards the end of the route when one of their friends from college ended up joining us, which I didn't think anything about at the time, other than he gave me weird vibes. Should have been my first clue. After we were done trick-or-treating, we brought the kids home to go to bed, but my friends wanted to go do something to keep the night going, since it was Halloween and in a college town. That's an excuse to party just like any other day. They decided on going downtown, but I declined since I wasn't feeling well, which was true, but I was also the only one with a car and didn't want to be the chauffeur, and went home. A few hours later, I was in bed reading a book. I still lived with my mom and brother, and my phone lit up from a number I didn't recognize. It was the friend that joined us while trick-or-treating. He explained that he got my number from my best friend's boyfriend, and he was concerned that I didn't feel well and insisted on bringing me soup to feel better. Some sort of red flag went off in my head, and I didn't want this guy to know where I lived, so I said no, my mom was taking care of it, but thank you anyway. He got a little pushy, but eventually backed down and proceeded to send me many texts about how much fun he had when we were out, and blah blah blah. I later found out he bailed on going downtown too because he only wanted to go with me. He then added me to Facebook, went through all of my pictures and liked all of them. Second red flag. Being the naive 18-year-old that I was, I just thought maybe he was being overly friendly, and is just a little weird. So I didn't avoid him or anything at school, since we hung out with the same people. One day when we didn't have school, he texted me asking if I wanted to go to lunch. I should have said no, and I accepted, thinking I was getting a free meal out of the deal since he insisted on paying, and it would be a quick visit. We met at the restaurant and sat down and talked and ate. It was super awkward, and then I stupidly mentioned I wanted to go to the mall to get some stuff. He insisted on driving me there and that his mom can move to the back seat. Wait, what? Apparently, he drove his mom's minivan, brought her with him and left her in the car while we went out for our date. I kept saying that she should come in and join us, and he got really weird about it and said she was napping and she didn't mind waiting. At that point, I started getting very uncomfortable. Luckily, we were done with our food, and I said I needed to leave. Thanked him for the food, and got up to go. He kept saying he'll meet me at the mall, and I was put in what I felt was a weird position, as I am not an assertive person, so I reluctantly said okay. We met at a large store connected to the mall, and I mentioned how I was here to look for a new scarf and started browsing. He picked out the most expensive one he could find and bought it for me, and almost threatened me not to return it. It was then I wanted to be left alone, so I said thank you and I was going to go home now. He insisted on walking me out to my car. We were parked on opposite ends of the mall, and his mom was still in the van. And I kept saying it was okay, I was fine. He was a big guy, and even simple walking caused him to break out in a sweat. And he wouldn't take no for an answer, so away we went. We passed by another and took a quick peek inside. There were a pair of boots that I very quickly, in passing, mentioned they were cute, but I don't know if I'd wear them. He bought them for me, and did the same somewhat threat to not return them, because they were gifts and you don't return gifts. Like, dude, then what are gift receipts for? At that point, I got a little firm and told him I wanted time alone, so please don't walk me out to my car. He accepted and went his merry way, clearly happy that he made those purchases to show he liked me. I go out to my car and wait for probably about 20 minutes. I knew what his van looked like at this point and kept my eye out for it, in case he was going to follow me home, but didn't see anything. I actually ended up going back to the mall and returned the boots and scarf. In reality, I didn't want either of them and was way too uncomfortable accepting those gifts from a strange person. I don't like owing people, and I had a feeling he was going to use that as some sort of leverage to get something from me. I took the long way home to make sure I wasn't being followed, and told my mom about what happened. She was concerned and thought it was strange as well, since he and I didn't really know each other. And it seemed like a weird act of desperation. I got a text from him a few hours later saying he hoped I liked his gifts. I responded saying I returned them because I wasn't comfortable with it, and he lost it. My phone kept lighting up with tons of texts. This was before it was easy to block someone, and I didn't know what to do. The old flip phone. And he was livid that I did such a disrespectful thing. I should be thankful he got those things for me. So I got angry and told him I didn't ask him for the gifts. He basically threatened me to keep them. And he didn't take no for an answer when I told him I didn't want them. So essentially, he was the one who disrespected me. He backed down a lot then. I told him to stop texting me and leave me alone. I got a few more texts, but eventually he stopped. It was weird at school because I kind of avoided being around my friends when I knew he was there. I still hung out with some of them alone, like my best friend. But when I knew a friend gathering was going on, I wouldn't go. They understood. Now this is where it got stupid. I am a very, very compassionate person, and 9 out of 10 times feel horrible for when I was mean to someone, even in this instance. I ended up texting the creeper one night apologizing for how rude I was to him, and he said he understood where I was coming from, and we had a normal conversation for a little bit until I fell asleep around 11 p.m. I know this because I woke up at 2 a.m., looked at my phone, and saw the last text I sent him was a little before 11 stating I was tired. After I fell asleep, he sent me one text, saw I didn't respond, texted again, saw I didn't respond, kept texting. We're talking on the verge of like 30 to 40 texts here. Called me from his cell phone about 10 times, called me from another number about 15 times because he thought I was ignoring him, and then sent me one last threatening message. If you don't respond within half an hour, I'm calling the police. I happened to wake up at 2 a.m., which was an hour after he sent that text, and flipped the fuck out, texting him that I fell asleep and he better have not called the police. You want to know why he called the police? Because he interpreted me saying I was tired as I was tired of living. He thought I killed myself. Never mind that it was, basically bedtime and he and I were talking, so yes, me killing myself is the most logical route to take here. I ran into my mom's room, told her what happened, and she goes, "For crying out loud, they have better things to do with their time. They aren't coming to check on you." I go back to my room, which looked out to our driveway, look out the window, see a cop car parked on the street with 2 flashlights walking up the drive. They knock on the door. I opened it, and I'm pretty sure the look on my face told them everything. "You Sally?" "Yep." "You know why we're here?" "Yep." "So what happened?" "I fell asleep." The police understood and actually called the creep back and told him to leave me the fuck alone, just as I was texting him to leave me the fuck alone. He then had the gall to ask for my address again. He had done this numerous times, to come over and apologize to me and that he loved me. I told him he doesn't even know me and he had absolutely no reason to be in love with me. His reasoning was that was how he worked. He fell in love first and decided if it was the right person or not. Dude was loony. This put a really big strain on my friendships at the college. His story was much more twisted and painted me as the bad guy, and I ended up making a lot of enemies, even with my best friend because he labeled me as a whore. There was another guy interested in me as well among those friends, but he was much less assertive, and I didn't give him the time of day, and everyone believed him, even though at that time I was still a virgin. I had to drop out of school because that circle of friends was so big, and whenever the creep saw me, he would get irrationally angry and his friends had to physically hold him back, which was a lot of people because he was massive. I since cut contact with all of them, and ended up going to a different school that I loved so much more, and am in a much better place without all them in my life. So creep from school. I hope I never have to see you again. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 315. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. I just want to say thanks to everybody who left encouragement regarding my comments on streaming and the weekend videos there. Probably going to try and get it together soon. I've just about, maybe, possibly gotten to grips with OBS, which is what I'll need to be using. So yeah, I'll come up with something. I'll likely just, I'll try it at first, maybe just a few minutes at first. So you might see occasional sporadic ones pop up and disappear. Maybe with the photo work. I might use old family pictures. So you won't know what I look like, but you'll get a rough idea, because if you see an old black and white picture of my dad, then you'll think, well, he must look kind of sort of like that. Although I'll check with my sister that's okay first. I don't want to be... She'll probably won't mind, actually. But I'll check with her first to make sure it's okay if when I'm doing the restorations, then I do it on stream. Anyway, with that, I think I'll head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.